What kind of recourse does someone have if there are negative reputation things?
We always recommend to try to outrank it, to just get visibility to positive and neutral feedback and proactively create content in order to push other rankings down. When you see it as a training material, imagine there is like a page, there's just one negative review about a brand. A machine reading this particular page is not going to take away a positive impression from this brand. It's just this negative feedback, but you put a positive one below it and it gets balanced a little bit. You put 5 positives below it and suddenly it's a positive review. It's not a negative anymore.
So it's kind of a new angle on don't feed the trolls. Now it's like make sure you feed the AI tools. James Schramko here. Welcome back to my podcast. This is episode 1078. We're chatting about reputation today. I've brought along Gert Mellak from SEOleverage.com. Hello, Gert.
Hey, James.
Gert, I guess now more than ever, people are using online reputation when they're making a decision. I'm pretty sure it's always been a case of trust, right, online. But in the early days of the internet, we could control our reputation to some extent by putting up a website. And then when social media profiles came, those were starting to feed in to the search engine. But there's a new element to all of this, which I've become aware of, and that is AI. AI has come to the party and it's starting to aggregate and put together information. I'd love to find out what are your observations in this changing market in terms of how reputation is formed online and what we can do about it. That's what I want to cover in this episode today. So how does it look on the landscape for you as an SEO business and in particular relation to reputation?
It absolutely got taken to the next complexity level in a sense that we used to really focus on Google, and we still do. It's still important if somebody searches for your brand name, you want to make sure you control page 1 and you don't have any sneaky things going on there from your competitors or affiliates. We might dive into those topics, what this can mean. But right now, and I actually became aware of it from a client who said his wife was actually researching on WhatsApp. And I was like, what? And this was shortly after ChatGPT came out. And he said, yeah, she signed up for a chat bot that's connected to ChatGPT, and she's now searching for her products on the WhatsApp application in one of the channels. And this is where I said, hey, there's something going on. This was shortly after the ChatGPT thing came out, and then published on my LinkedIn about it as well, just like some cases on what this can actually mean, because it's now suddenly opening up for a lot of different applications to just provide a chat because it's a nice feature. You have Copilot inside Skype as one of the contacts. You can just ask it to do something, to create something, to give you information. You have really good platforms, Perplexity, for example, citing a lot of websites. The whole landscape just got really, really varied. And there are not the tools out there that would really give you feedback on what your reputation actually is like on the different platforms. So we have been doing a lot of work here to actually prepare for that, and are preparing all our existing clients already for this new age of what search is going to be like.
Yeah, gosh, that's the first time I've heard of someone using WhatsApp for a search. I don't actually have WhatsApp. I think if I did, it would be a big distraction. But how does that actually work? Like, where do they get that information from, and how would it differ from what would happen if we did a Google search?
The information, those chatbots, actually, they always get it from the platforms. Most of them are connected to a third-party platform like OpenAI, for example, which hosts ChatGPT. And those platforms need to be trained on something. So they are not doing, and this is a big misunderstanding, those AI platforms, they don't go out and do this Google search for you and summarize the findings. They have their database, they have their index, which is why SEO is still around, because this index, the way how they understand which brand is more important, which ranking should be where, etc., directly factors into what kind of answer comes out of them. So we have this input equals output concept here as well. Whatever goes into a language model is going to define what the output is. You can try this very simply with ChatGPT. You ask it in one sentence to write an article about how to learn surfing, or you give it some context, teach it something, and then the article is going to be much better, just because the training material that you give it, the context you provide, is much more insightful So the output is going to be better.
I noticed that you published a book on this topic, and I was reading through that book. I got it on my Kindle here. Well, congratulations. I know how much resistance I have to publishing books. Fix Your Online Reputation is the name of this book. And you've got a case study in there where you're sort of talking about how it might affect a regular sort of agency or company. And it was quite an interesting thing seeing the process of where consumers would go and how you can actually really change the outcome. I think in the case study, they had a pretty so-so result originally, and then you helped them out, and then they were able to really improve their conversions. I'd love if you could sort of lean into a little bit about how that works, because I think it's informative, and you could give us sort of an example of the things we might be able to do to train the AI well and to make sure that we're having some control over our reputation.
So we definitely want to always understand that whatever is out there on the internet can be used as training material. And this sounds very simple, but it's actually really complex, because you think what's out there on the internet about a particular brand. Imagine reviews from an ex-employee on a site like Glassdoor, customer reviews on Trustpilot, not all of them positive, not all of them even from regular customers, but maybe it's just competitors trying to take you down. From forums, old forum posts, clients maybe or companies shifting focus. They might have been doing something else and were actually known 10 years ago for something different. Some working in a car dealership at Mercedes, and suddenly doing online business coaching, things happen.
Or an actor on IMDb, you know.
IMDb, exactly. So lives change, but the machines might still use this as training material. So we want to really get a good idea. We were working with a lawyer, and the engines said, hey, yeah, this is actually a really good company. Just the boss shouts at his employees all the time. And this came back. Would you want to work with this firm, or would you continue searching? Right? There's a question. Would you really want to work with this company where the boss shouts at his employees all the time? Probably not. At least it doesn't help the purchase decision. And these kinds of things come up. We come across fake testimonials, for example, where a very small firm suddenly is working apparently for an international corporation, which is definitely not the case. And you see this and say, yeah, they probably made this up. It's impossible they were working for them. But the machine just brings this up. So you really need to know where the status actually is, what is actually happening, what is out there when somebody searches for the best course on, I don't know, how to run a car dealership, and then see what comes actually back, and then do some research. Where does this information come from, and how can I moderate it?
What kind of recourse does someone have if there are negative reputation things? I mean, if it came from the machine, is the machine taking responsibility for it? Are the platforms taking responsibility? I do remember there was a law case in Australia where someone asked Google to remove some information that wasn't favorable towards them, and I don't think it was accurate either. Does that change by country?
It's usually the best chance that you have before AI is actually to outrank something rather than get it taken down. It can take years. It might backfire. They might just filter it elsewhere, and now it's suddenly on 20 different sites instead of one. We always recommend to try to outrank it, to just get visibility to positive and neutral feedback, and proactively create content in order to push other rankings down. Then there are, Google, for example, has specific cases where you can actually file a request to take something down, but it needs to be like a very, very severe isolated cases. There are some regulations with Google where this can actually happen, but then it might only get taken down, like you suggest, in a particular country, and it might still be around in other. Maybe in Europe it's taken down, in the US it's still around, and then it's only half the solution. And now with AI, it's even more complex. There is not something like one particular result that can be taken down. It's the training material. It's like educating a child. You can't just undo something. You promise it to get sweets after dinner the other day. You can't just undo this. You need to retrain this child. And this is what we do with Google as well. We retrain it. Now you think James Schramko is an actor. No, he's not an actor anymore. He's an online business coach. Let's train you, let's give you enough material and teach you what the new situation is. And if this education is consistent, the machine is able to actually take the leap and jump on this new piece of information.
So we have a lot of control over our own reputation.
Absolutely, but we need to know about it. We need to be aware of it.
How do we do that? I remember I used to subscribe to Google Alerts for my name and a couple of other programs. And it would sort of send an instance of when something got published. And that was handy. But is there more we can do than that?
There are really good branding alert tools out there. Google Alerts, the problem with Google Alerts is they only focus on what is indexed on Google. So if you have social media platforms which very often don't allow Google even to crawl it, it's not going to appear in Google Alerts that somebody's talking about you negatively on a particular platform. So you all want to subscribe to one of those tools, or for example, we do this for our clients specifically. We send them a summary every week and say, look, this was your reputation report from this week. So, and specific actions, and this is what we have already done in order to mitigate this, or you should moderate that, or you make sure that you comment on it. Because the interesting thing here when you see it as a training material, imagine there is like a page, there's just one negative review about a brand. A machine reading this particular page is not going to take away a positive impression from this brand. It's just this negative feedback, but you put a positive one below it and it gets balanced a little bit. You put 5 positives below it and suddenly it's a positive review. It's not a negative anymore. The problem very often is that people are not even aware of this first negative review. They don't even know this exists. And suddenly they get certain feedback on ChatGPT and say, I didn't even know I had a mention on Glassdoor about our boss shouting at employees. We had no idea. We weren't even able to respond. So it's always important to respond, always important to actually moderate it. Unless it's like a very, very old thread, you might just revive it again and give it a different feedback. There are other strategies around that.
So it's kind of a new angle on don't feed the trolls. Now it's like make sure you feed the AI tools.
You absolutely feed the AI tools. You need to, it's not only a human potential client forming an impression about your brand, it's every single AI engine reading this content. And from that angle, you just don't know anymore who is going to see it, where this might be used. And suddenly somebody's searching for 10 ideas of where companies actually screwed up. And suddenly Nike is there and Adidas because they had manufacturing issues. Right? So you really don't know what's going to happen. It's not going to be able to consistently monitor all cases. What you can do is monitor what is out there as potential training material and moderate it or produce better training material as much as possible in a strategic way.
Okay, so quick summary. We can control our reputation. We should be aware that there are other places other than Google that are currently forming a reputation around us, that we should monitor what our reputation actually is, and we should respond or counterbalance anything that is unfair or inaccurate in those places so that it can feed a better version of itself. And what else should we be doing to be proactive on this? And how much of an impact is this going to make to the trust factor or the conversion element if we can do this? Like, is there a return on investment for certain people? And if so, who are those people that would get the best value from a service like that?
If you're in a position where trust is really important, where nobody's going to buy from me if they don't trust me, you just need to think they are going to ask someone. And if this is not necessarily a person, but Google or a machine, about alternative providers, about if the pricing is really worth it and things like those, you automatically are in this group that can highly benefit from it. And very often on online reputation management, we've seen really big figures here. It's not about how much more you can make, it's how much less you can lose. We had a client that was actually able to figure out they lost 6 figures every month in sales just because people would Google their brand after an impulse buy on a webinar and find negative reviews and ask for a refund. So they just asked a refund why they asked for a refund, and the comment was always because we found you're a scam, because there was one client unhappy posting all over the internet this was a scam. And they would just ask for a refund, and they said, okay, some of the refunds were actually 6 figures every month. So very often you might be losing revenue and you just don't even know about it. People, we see this all the time, real estate agents, lawyers, we see this all the time. They have like 2-star Google reviews. They don't care about it. They're busy anyway, but they don't know how much they're losing just because there is a 2 out of 5-star review popping up on Google, because it's a lot also to do with the process people have around this.
What about if they are a bandit? I mean, gosh, real estate agents, I've had my fair share of bandits in that industry. I've got one right now, actually, still supposed to be sending money after, 9 months of chasing that they owe me. And I'm just wondering, maybe some people deserve a bad reputation. Are you careful about who you help and how you help? Is this available to anybody, or do you have criteria?
We have always had criteria, right? We also with search engine optimization, there's not every single project I could be working on, I'm working on. I just have another case from for yesterday, I think, company reaching out I definitely don't want to work with. Everybody needs make their own decision. What I have seen though is that so often it's really legit businesses that have maybe 500 positive reviews getting taken down by 1 or 2 negative ones. And this is where we just see we can have a really, really big impact. And I'm very open with those companies where I decide not to work with them. And so, look, this is not an area I want to work in, or I don't think we can help you, or I might give them a couple of suggestions and let them go. But it's definitely, some people have even personal issues. They might have in a almost previous life, 20 years ago, had some issues, and they pretty much rehabilitated themselves. As much as I can judge from my point, and so look, they deserve a second chance. We can actually help them out and help their family, help them get off the ground again, because sometimes some past issues seem to be haunting people as well.
You're kind of like God, the God of the internet. I've seen that too, actually. I know a hardworking guy who had a great product, helped a lot of people. And there was one guy who I suspect was jealous, and he wrote a really polarizing piece, a hit piece around this guy's product. It wasn't a financial product either. It was a health-related product. And he just had a bee in his bonnet. He was out through either jealousy or some kind of myopia in terms of his viewpoint. And it wasn't very balanced, and it wasn't very fair. But that one piece, I can tell you firsthand, it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost sales. And this poor guy, the target of this, had to suffer for quite some time and sort of reconfigure and go about business in a different way, all because of just one person's article that ranked very well. He had a really authoritative blog. And just like you said, everyone who was looking for this product found this one negative slant article that was super biased, super raw, and incredibly unfair, not balanced at all. So I feel like those sort of people could really do with some help to figure out a campaign around outranking it. In this case, the hostile guy was the kind of guy who would copy every email that was sent requesting it to be removed and just paste it onto the extra article, like just inflame it even more. That was just putting more fuel on the fire and taking it to the next level.
We saw this with a lawyer as well on a reputation project. So our client, before they came to us, they asked the lawyer to send one of those cease and desist letters. And the guy actually took down the article, but he published the cease and desist letter. And this continued to rank, and just saying, look, this guy has his lawyer go after everybody who talks negatively about his program. And then it's the lawyer's letter that actually ranks there. And just imagine what this does to the customer journey, to the purchase process. You can be the best on a webinar or selling on a VSL. If people come across this, there's no way they're going to buy from you. They might not do anything. They might just wait and say, okay, I can't trust these guys.
So strategically, you say just avoid that bad player and work around the edges, work on smothering them.
Exactly. You can. It's much better to proactively control the narrative rather than to get rid of the occasional hater, so to speak. Just do your thing, but make sure that you do it strategically. Put content out there that can actually be this good training material. And then with reputation management, we obviously have ways to get those positive pieces ranking higher, and the other one is going to disappear on page 2 or page 3 of Google.
What are the chances of success? So I imagine that some of the people come to you could easily feel like they're going to pay some money and maybe not get a result, and then just getting into a deeper hole.
It's very unlikely for this to happen. It's reputation management usually works really well because of a few criteria Google is really interested in, which is fresh content, which is semantically coherent content that they can fully understand. And then it also goes down to the different platforms that factors into the strategy a little bit. People just think just because they write a few posts or go to a few podcasts now, Google is just jumping on those things. Google is more strategic about this. So you have to know a few things here and there on how Google is going to work, what they're going to accept as an alternative, better post about you, and what they might skip because they just give a certain platform maybe more visibility. An example that's now in the media right now is Reddit. Reddit is gaining a lot of visibility after a collaboration with Google right now. If you have a negative Reddit thread, you're not going to take it down with a positive guest post or podcast. You are going to need a positive Reddit thread, just as an example. So the chances of success are really, really high. It takes a few months like everything in SEO, because we ultimately do SEO for your website, but also for other platforms. So we do SEO for other platforms that have press releases about you, a podcast guest or whatever. Depends if it's a personal brand or a business brand. And then we also usually try to trigger a so-called knowledge panel for Google, which means Google understands you, they get you, they understand what you stand for, who you help. And then the ultimate goal is the knowledge panel.
And how much does this relate to current events versus historical things like past clients? So I'll give you an example. A little while back, there was a comedian in Australia who asked one of the guests to leave because the guest had a baby and the baby was being noisy. And that lady took particular offense, and she went to the newspapers and the talk shows on TV, and she told them that she was breastfeeding and she felt embarrassed. Then I noticed the comedian published on his social media site his point of view, and he also was a guest on some of the shows in response. And he said, look, I can't see anything down there because I've got a bright light in my face. It's pitch black, but I can hear the baby. And it's for 15 plus age people, and it was interrupting the show, and I feel terrible about it, but I had to ask her to leave because of that. Funnily enough, when this lady who was complaining was on the talk show, she had the baby, and the talk show host actually said, oh, hey, maybe it's time for daddy to take the baby for a minute while we chat. So she literally doubled down on this getting rid of the baby narrative, which was terribly unfortunate. And so what happened is the talk show actually had to turn off their comments on social media because it was going out of control. They're like, how dare this lady bring a baby to a 15 plus age thing and be so entitled to think she can stay if the baby's screaming. And then they were really slamming the TV show host for putting their foot in her mouth and saying, well, maybe the baby can go to daddy, right? So they've gone into damage control. They've switched it all off. We've now got this lady out there. She's just wound up. She's completely upset and talking to anyone who will have her. It's great news for the media. Like, what a story. If it bleeds, it leads, right? They're loving this because they're the media, journalists. And then the comedian is the one who's feeling sort of uncomfortable about all of this. All this discussion's happening. He's basically under attack from asking someone who's brought someone who doesn't even qualify to be in the room, asking them to not be there and offering a refund as well. But he's getting slammed by some people. But for the most part, people support him. What should happen in this situation from a control perspective of reputation? Because I imagine this is going to be a little blemish for the short term, at least.
Definitely for the short term. I was going to say it depends really. In these cases, we really like to analyze what are the platforms really doing with it. So you have news articles have a very short life. So there are sometimes news articles, especially if there is hardly any other content that stick for years. We had a guy reach out who was involved and then found not guilty, but was involved into some sort of crime kind of article. And he reached out and said, look, I can't get a job because even though I wasn't guilty, I still pop up with my name on those news articles. And there are just 20 articles about this guy on the internet, so those news articles still rank. If this is a comedian that is producing content out there, chances are that the news articles are not going to stick around for too long. The alternative, sometimes there are really interesting strategies where you could actually tie this comedian to something else that's related. If he had a baby, his name plus baby can suddenly lead to a different content. He could be holding his nephew who is a baby, and his name plus baby could lead to a different context. For example, it would be fresh news. It's related again, and it would just deviate the attention a little bit.
Or he could be an ambassador for a breastfeeding cause or something.
For example, right?
He did say to the lady in his post that, he can really relate because he was actually a baby for at least 2 years. So, he had some fun with it. The lady said that he initially said, "Hey, lady, I speak baby," and the baby's saying, "Get me out of here." But I think so. What I'm hearing is he should continue to publish and start marrying up topics that, if someone was actually searching for it, would start to take it down a different path.
I think it's important to get on it proactively. People sometimes get very passive and it should really not happen, and are really upset that this is happening, that one person can actually do all this damage, etc. But it doesn't help anybody, right? So
I'm just thinking one of the worst ones that came out lately, when there was a stabbing incident and the police named a completely innocent person incorrectly in the first few hours of it. This guy's name and picture were published. They were retracted with an apology, but I can imagine that person would have a lot of trouble, unless they're famous or have got a good footprint. That's going to dominate anything searching for that person. Even imagine he's trying to do a dating app or something. They search for this guy and he comes up as a mass murderer type. That is just an outrageous miscarriage of reputation. And so that's the kind of thing where I guess he's definitely going to go for compensation, and rightly so. But he could use some of that funds to clean up reputation, right? To start publishing
You should probably do both, to win some time, start as early as possible, and then use some of the damages to actually figure out a new way or rename.
Definitely be publishing his court case, yes, and making sure that they flood the thing with the wrongful naming situation, right?
Yeah, I think there must be cases out there that consider a name change, because
that's pretty severe.
Terrible. It's terrible, but it's probably the easiest. Sometimes for brands, it's easier to rename, rebrand, come out as something completely fresh, and use the resources. Sometimes those considerations, we need to take them. And for individuals, sometimes it's really a shame, because it might be, like you said, private individual. They don't have a business, they have their job, they have their life. They were somehow mentioned even wrongfully, it's even worse. And their life is affected. They don't have a marketing budget. We had a person reach out that doesn't have a marketing. They said, "Look, I work a normal 9-to-5 job. I don't have a marketing budget, but I'm in this situation. What should I do?" And we gave him, I wasn't able to work with him. I gave him a list of advice of what I would do in his situation, and let him go. But some people are really in the situation for no cause at all, for no reason at all.
One thing I'm discovering as a parent, when I meet a new parent, sometimes I'll look them up, right? And it surprises me how few reference points some people actually have. Such a tiny little footprint on the internet. They might have a LinkedIn, a barely used Facebook account, and maybe one or two sports club type references. Some of them have a footprint that is literally 5 listings. And it fascinates me that people can still get around this day and age and be so under the radar, but it still happens rarely, I suppose.
It happens rarely, but it's also a major vulnerability if you ever happen to come into one of those scenarios. I've been publishing on the internet since I was 16. So there's so much on the internet about me and from me, from forums, from developer forums, from back in the days, to marketing, to SEO, to lead generation, whatever I've been touching over the years. Sometimes somebody can attack me and I'm going to struggle and I have to fight, but there's other content as well about me, and it's not going to impact what ChatGPT is going to say about me because there's one article maybe. At least there is other material to compensate. But creating like a solid footprint and say, okay, I can fill up a page one on Google with the content I have produced and content about me and my social media, etc., is necessary. But also because you mentioned social media, we see this with a lot of companies. They might have an old Facebook profile that's completely outdated. They don't care about it because they have found their audiences on LinkedIn. That's great, but the profile is still around. And somebody looking you up, seeing that you haven't published since 2018, is not going to be convinced that you are the right fit.
That's such a good point. It's a recurring theme lately. It's about elimination, deletion, curation. I was talking to my team today, the team meeting. We're still in shock that we have less visits to our website than we used to have 6 months ago because of you, Gert. Because we deleted 1,099 pages off my website, it meant that we were missing some of the traffic that was not useful to us in any way, shape, or form. So we actually have to get more comfortable with less, but far more effective. It's like having a big vanity email list, but no one opens your emails, right? Same deal. You have a smaller list, but they open the emails, or a small following, but they buy. I think it's very important to clean up. In our meeting today, we had a new criteria for one of our social media channels. We set a rule to basically a minimum criteria that we would therefore delete content if it didn't meet the minimum criteria. It might be a set number of views. If it had a lower than a very high percentage like rate or something, then it just gets deleted. And that is in line with less but better. And that's our philosophy. But with reputation management, in some cases, you need a lot more. If you're going to win the game of control, it sounds like you need to be populating where you get to control the narrative. I like that expression. So if we're at this sort of point in our discussion, what are the action steps? We're going to do some monitoring. We're going to address anything we find. We're going to have continuous awareness from then on. We're going to control what gets populated. We're going to remove and prune old stuff. What am I missing?
I think one thing people are missing very often is process and responsibility. Who in your company is going to take responsibility for the monitoring part? Is this going to be you, your staff member? Do they have the SOPs, the operating procedures to do that? Do they have the tools to do that? Do they have the knowledge to do that? And also what happens in certain cases. So imagine you have a negative product review that needs to kick off a particular process on how we react to this. What are we doing in order to create positive reviews actively? People only ask for positive reviews when they have a negative one and they don't want it to be the last one. So they now start asking some good clients to leave a positive review about them. There must be a process around getting positive reviews in the first place. So a negative one can't affect you so much, and always triggering a positive one if the last one is negative. There must be processes around it. So very often for us, it's also consulting with clients. We say, let's look at the different scenarios. And say, okay, if this happens, what's being done? Who is the person responsible? What is the process? And how do we track if this is now not impacting us in any way? And find a solution with this particular client, maybe also, in order to really pretty much shield the company, defend your brand from these kinds of attacks, and make sure that you're in a good position in the first place. The second thing is really that some people know their customer support sucks. They just know it. They come to us and say, look, I know we don't provide the best service. And this is why wouldn't you start there before talking to a reputation agency, right? And they said, yeah, we are planning this for next year. We're going to have the production in-house and I don't know what, but now we need to do something. Some people are very well aware that they are not providing the best service. Or we had a client say, look, I know 10 years ago my program wasn't the best. Made some money back then, but now I really have a good program. We're getting good reviews, but those reviews are still haunting us from back then and we need to do something about it. Very often it's just a lack of response and taking responsibility for your product and just really aiming at providing the best possible product in the first place. And then assigning responsibility and defining the processes on what needs to be happening to defend your brand.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for those people. I mean, I've always been in competition with people like that who have been greedy, selfish, under-delivered, rip people off, The whole time I was online, because I came from Mercedes-Benz, the first person I hired was a support desk. I've now got 6 people who can answer support tickets so that we have a timely and effective response. It's always been important. I just want to state this for anyone listening. If you sell anything online, you should have a high level of service support. It's a product feature. It is a retention feature. And, it's so normal when you're dealing with companies that they have shit service. I ordered a surfboard 6 months ago and they have a 6-week fulfillment time. I've heard nothing from them. I've even checked their website to see if it's still up in case they went broke. But I did email the guy 2 days ago and just said, hey, I'm just following up to check in. The last time I followed up was actually February. So I followed up, but I have not heard back. Still, that's been 48 hours, nothing. And, it was paid for in advance and everything. And I just think these are the same people who complain and whinge that other companies are building mass-produced boards in Thailand and doing a lot of marketing and having boards in stock, and they're squeezing out the poor little local shapers. Well, the local shapers have a lot to answer for not being very effective communicators and not servicing their clients very well. In some cases, I want to state that. I know some of my surfboard shaper suppliers listen to this podcast, and there's some really good ones out there, and they're the ones I want to support. But it's so disappointing when you get let down, and it affects your ability to purchase again. I don't think I would buy again from this organization. The lifetime value of me as a client for a surfboard company is reasonable. I'm not a maniac, but I buy them more than once. This is the second board that I've purchased from this company. But I would have purchased plenty of boards in between in the time that I bought the first board 5 years ago from these people. They actually mucked me around then too. So anyway, does someone have to wait till there's an emergency until they get into this, or is this something you suggest anyone do?
I think now is a really good time to bake your brand into the AI algorithms. Now is where they do major training efforts. Now is where they crawl the internet regularly to find new training material, get better, and really learn how this works. So we have seen everybody who has seen the first versions of ChatGPT making all kinds of stuff up and not being able to do simple math. We're not in this stage anymore with GPT-4 now. We are going to go to a stage where those tools are going to do some fact checking before they come back with an answer. This fact checking is going to be based on how they understand your brand, how they understand who you help and how you do this, and what kind of authority you have on the web. And the authority on the web is not going to depend on what your website says, but what others say about you. And this is a big opportunity to actually control the narrative, like I said, control the discussion and educate different engines like Google, but also the AI platforms now about your brand and where you actually excel. And if you can pair this and go in and establish, first of all, where you are, what do engines say about you? We audit these 4 brands and just go manually right now because we don't have the tools. So we go manually with some prepared queries into those engines and they'll ask around and say, okay, do you come up in the top 10 list in your industry, for example? If you don't, why? Why are your competitors there and you are not? Sometimes the engines even tell you why. I had Nike not coming up in the top shoe brands, for example, interestingly. And
Who?
this was Nike.
Nike.
Or Nike.
Vaguely familiar.
Vaguely, right. It was interesting. And I asked why, and the engine said because they have manufacturing issues.
Gotcha.
And this was an interesting one. So it's just really, first of all, important that you're aware of it, but then also get some help lining up a process that works in moving forward for you.
How do we get your help, Gert?
Always head over to SEOleverage.com. We're doing search and AI branding reports now, which really give you awareness. We line up in traffic lights, colors, where you are on which platform and what needs to be done, and then just draw a game plan from there.
Nice. Well, thank you. And gosh, what an action-packed episode. So look after your reputation, feed the engines while they're loading them up, and prosper, get those conversions. Thank you so much, Gert.
Thank you so much, James, for having me.
This is James Schramko.